Universal Audio's Apollo audio interfaces enable you to seamlessly link multiple interfaces together, combining inputs, outputs, virtual channels, DSP processing power, and monitor sends to create the most flexible recording and mixing music production modular ecosystem available. In this video, I'm showing you how easy it is to do this and the many benefits this will offer your workflow. And stick around till the end of the video to see how I've incorporated the Apollo I/O with some tasty analog gear for a killer hybrid mixing studio. Hi, I'm Ed from edthorn.com, here to help you make sense of the vast Universal Audio Apollo infrastructure capabilities and potential available to you. In part 1 of this mini-series, I discussed 5 killer reasons why professional studios, musicians, and mix engineers rely on Apollo interfaces to execute their work. Even if you already have and use an Apollo, it's worth checking that video out because there are many tools available, some of which you might not have been aware of. Up to 6 UAD2 devices can be linked together over Thunderbolt, including up to 4 Apollo interfaces. Now, you may start with one desktop interface, such as an Apollo Solo, Twin, or X4, but you can add 3 rack units alongside these as your needs grow. On top of this, each Apollo can process up to 8 channels of optical ADAT or stereo SPDIF digital inputs and up to 8 ADAT or stereo SPDIF digital outputs on the X4, 6, 8, and 8P models. The Apollo driver is actually expandable up to 128 inputs and outputs with ADAT, AES, and virtual channels. If you're into heavy-duty recording, stacking up to 4 Apollo XPs would provide an incredibly powerful front end with 32 unison-enabled preamps and 24 cores of DSP, sounding like pretty much any vintage console ever made. If you need lots of line I/O for mixing on an analog console or hybrid system like I do, then 4 Apollo X16s would provide 64 incredible high-performance plus 24 dBu capable analog in and outs. In all of these scenarios, you still have room for 2 more UAD2 satellite or PCIe DSP units for a total of 6 devices. When combined with 2 UAD2 Octo satellites, this last example would host 40 cores of UAD2 DSP. To give you an idea of the power 40 cores offers, here's what you could run at 48 kilohertz. Of course, for the ultimate DSP mixing system, you could combine 6 UAD2 Octo satellites, hosting a total of 48 DSP cores. This is a hugely powerful system, especially when combined with your favorite native UADX plugins. Click the link in the description for this video explaining the benefits of native plugins. Remember, these are free if you already own the DSP versions of the native plugins available. For me, the beauty of Apollo is that you can tailor your setup to best suit your workflow and expand your system with your needs as you develop from a home studio to a pro studio. No complicated network routing is required for any combination of these devices. Simply link them together via Thunderbolt cables and the Apollo does the rest of the work. The Apollos communicate amongst themselves under the hood, as it were, using an elaborate star clocking arrangement to ensure low jitter performance, managing the distribution of DSP processing, and phase aligning all the inputs across all the devices whilst calculating input latency. Seriously, this could not be easier. There's no need for word clock cabling in an all Apollo system, although connections are available on Apollo rack units to allow for correct primary and secondary clocking arrangements when using third-party units such as ADAT-equipped preamps or external digital effects processors. Connecting multiple units together also increases your headphone mix count with up to 8 headphone outputs available. 1 per Solo or Twin, 2 per X4 and each rack unit, all fed from up to 4 individual Q mixers in Apollo Console or Luna. To demonstrate this, here in the Settings tab in Console, we can see that I just have my Apollo Twin connected to my Mac, and we can see that the I/O options available to us, including 8 ADAT or the stereo SPDIF inputs. By simply connecting my Apollo X6 with a Thunderbolt cable, the devices automatically communicate, and as you can see, Console now recognizes our additional inputs and outputs. As you can see, my Twin Mark II is a Thunderbolt 2 device, and the X-Series interfaces are Thunderbolt 3 devices. However, this is not a problem. Simply use an approved Thunderbolt adapter and the devices are seamlessly linked. Thunderbolt 1 provides enough bandwidth to run the entire chain of 6 UAD2 devices. All Thunderbolt versions are fine for Apollo interfaces. It should be noted that the Apollo Solo will require a Thunderbolt 3 cable to provide enough power if you're connecting directly to your computer. It should also be noted that the Apollo X rack units also supply enough power down a Thunderbolt 3 cable if you wanted to have a Solo as your desktop device and a carry-away mobile traveling recording unit. In console, we can configure which device is the primary interface. This affects things like the number of available Q buses. The Twin has 2, whilst the X4 upwards offer 4, and which device we need to plug our speakers into. As the X6 has more headphone outputs and line outputs, I want this to be my primary device, so I drag this to the top to become device A. I'm not physically changing the order of the devices on the Thunderbolt cable daisy chain. This is soft configurable into primary and secondary unit setups. It's easy. Now, if I connect my X8P to this chain, again, I can reshuffle the order of the inputs and outputs, select which device is the primary, and configure headphone outputs too. When a Twin or X4 desktop unit is set as a secondary device, it'll operate in remote mode and control the monitor section on the primary rack device. However, the Talkback mic in the desktop unit remains active and provides a better clarity of control room chat from the desktop area, meaning you can leave your racks far away in another rack if needed. The Solo, Twin and X4 desktop devices will always need to be the last in the Thunderbolt chain, the last away from your computer, because they only have a single Thunderbolt port and don't have the second port that is provided on the satellite units and the rack units that enable the daisy chaining. Here in my studio, I have my Apollo Twin linked to my X6, linked to my X8P, and finally an Octo satellite core for additional DSP whilst mixing before hitting my M1 Mac. The order of these rack units doesn't make a difference. The satellite, for example, can go anywhere in the Thunderbolt daisy chain, besides at the end, like I've said, where your desktop Apollo needs to live. With these 3 devices connected, I have a total of 12 Unison preamps and 22 DSP cores. This is plenty for recording drums and more DSP than I've ever come close to maxing out in a mixing session. To hear these 12 Unison preamps in action on a full drum kit, both dry and utilising the Neve 1073 and API Vision channel strip emulations, check out the extensive walkthrough of the Apollo interfaces I mentioned at the beginning of the video. All the Apollos host additional lineouts in addition to the monitor outputs that can be used to integrate external preamps, compressors, EQs, and other analog outboard gear, including a 500 series rack, for example. On the Twin X and X4, you would need to route these back into your XLR and jack combination inputs and bypass the preamps in console. The X6 and X8 have designated line-ins for this. The X8P and X16 utilize D-Sub-25 connections to route your analog inserts. For example, in my studio, I have my 8XP permanently hooked up via DB25 connectors to my Flock Audio passive digitally controlled patch bay for mixing. This takes up I/O 1 to 8 on the Flock, leaving 24 I/Os for 24 channels of processing. The Flock Audio patch is a powerful piece of kit, enabling me to digitally route any combination of all this analog outboard gear at the click of a button. I have different presets for different sessions, fully recallable also at the click of a button. These 8 channels of I/O out of my X8P enable me to mix and match mono and stereo send and returns. For example, sending a vocal track through my Harrison Great River EQ, then into the Warm Audio WA76 and 2A compressors, then into the Marg EQ4 before sending this back into Logic. This is facilitated by loading the I/O plugin onto the desired track in Logic, like so. I like to send my bass track into this SSL 611 EQ before hitting this rather lovely JLM LA500A compressor. This Wes Audio Raya Vari-Mute is my go-to stereo guitar bus compressor, usually followed by the SSL Ultraviolet EQ. This is a tasty combination. My go-to bus compressor is the Warm Audio Buscom. This thing is incredible value for money and adds so much punch to drums. And this is usually combined with the API 550B EQs for a thick and deep sound. And of course the SSL G-Bus sits on my master bus for a tasty musical glue. In console, I have a different couple of sessions saved with the preamps bypassed and channels labelled for each type of session. Here I have one for mixing drums with kick, snare, toms and stereo overheads going into different processors, and one for bus mixing a whole track with my drums, guitar and keys buses going into 3 different stereo chains, and my bass and vocals going to mono processing chains. The flexibility of the Apollo infrastructure is mind-blowing, and there's just nothing out there that really competes that's this easy to use, in my opinion. Let me know what outboard gear you're using in your setups and how you've got it all patched in the comments below. Investing in the Universal Audio ecosystem may seem expensive, but the flexibility, sound quality, the modular expandability, and the processing power on offer just isn't available anywhere else. The I/O routing for incorporating outboard gear is easily recallable, making swapping between sessions easy. The arrangement of DSP, clocking, and I/O under the hood with no complicated digital networking required makes this system very musician-friendly. There's not an IP address or Dante card in sight. Yes. If you found value in this video, please check out the Apollo interfaces using the affiliate links in the description below. Purchasing any of your home studio gear through these links is a great way to support the channel. I've been Ed Thorne. Thank you for watching. It's been emotional. See you on the next one.